Tell me about Moore v. Harper. That was the Independent State Legislature Theory. What's that all about?
Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
Yes, Moore v. Harper concerned whether or not the Elections Clause in Article 1 of the Constitution gave the state legislature sole authority to regulate elections for federal office in their states without any judicial oversight. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court held that the Elections Clause did not preclude judicial oversight of the legislature's regulation of federal elections.
I can tell you looked at the case. Here's one way of looking at it. Every state has a state constitution. And I want you to tell me if you think I'm wrong here. Every state has a state constitution. And in fact, many state constitutions preceded the federal constitution. And some of the provisions in our federal constitution were copied directly from state constitutions. And as I read Moore v. Harper, what the Supreme Court is saying to a state legislature is, look, yes, Congress gave you the power to draw congressional districts, but you've got to do it consistent with your state constitution. And so the state courts get to weigh in. And if the state courts don't render opinions that are consistent with the federal constitution, then the federal courts get to weigh in. What do you think?
I believe that that's a fair reading of, or maybe perhaps reading between the lines of that opinion. That particular question is not one that I'd considered previously, although I have reviewed that opinion.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a heated moment from a recent Judiciary Committee hearing where Senator Kennedy grilled Judge Maddox and Mr. Haji on some crucial legal issues. If you're into law, politics, or just want to understand the complex debates happening behind the scenes, this one's for you. Before we jump in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any deep dives like this in the future.
Mr. Haji, tell me about this waters of the United States controversy. What's it all really about?
Senator, I'm not, I've been an attorney for 12 years with the Navy, and I've practiced in government contract law for a long time, and I've worked on those kinds of issues for the last almost 12 years. I haven't encountered that particular issue that you're referencing. Okay.
All right, let's get started. Senator Kennedy, known for his straightforward style, questions Judge Maddox and others about their judicial philosophies and key Supreme Court rulings. Kennedy praises the panel but makes it clear he's here to focus on the law, not politics. He stresses that judges must follow the law as it is, including precedent, and then dives into Moore v. Harper. Moore v. Harper revolves around whether state legislatures have exclusive authority to regulate federal elections without judicial oversight. The Supreme Court recently said, no, state courts still have a say, and if they don't act consistently with the federal Constitution, then federal courts can step in. Senator Kennedy points out that every state has its own constitution, and these state constitutions matter when legislatures draw congressional districts. Judge Maddox agrees that this interpretation fits with the court's ruling. It's a reminder that even state legislatures aren't above the law or state constitutional protections. Fascinating stuff. Next, Senator Kennedy asks about the waters of the United States controversy, a big topic in environmental and administrative law. Mr. Haji admits this isn't his area, as his expertise lies in government contract law and naval legal matters. This moment shows the diversity of expertise in these hearings and reminds us that no one can be an expert on everything. Then comes an interesting exchange about strict liability, the legal principle where someone can be held liable without proof of negligence. Senator Kennedy questions how it aligns with due process rights. Judge Maddox explains strict liability applies in limited serious circumstances, like product liability cases involving dangerous products. He argues that strict liability still respects due process because defendants have the right to be heard in court, but Kennedy highlights the tension between legislative intent and individual rights. This is a perfect example of the nuanced debates that shape our legal system every day.
Tell me, this will be my last question. Tell me, doesn't strict liability seem inherently unfair to you?
So my understanding of strict liability, Senator, is that there's limited circumstances for when it's applied, and my job...
Like what?
Excuse me?
Give me some examples.
Like in product liability case, for example. And I think the idea of strict liability is under those limited circumstances to encourage the right sort of behavior for, let's say, a product manufacturer to not create a product that's going to kill a baby, for example, that severe consequences have to ensue.
Well, I'm not saying I disagree with you, but tell me, how does it comport with due process? I mean, this is basically, some would argue, this is basically a legislature saying, hey, if you do it, you're automatically liable. You don't get due process. You don't get to defend yourself. There are no defenses. What do you think about that?
My understanding is that strict liability comports with due process because you have the right to be heard in court. And it's, I think, a good example of the balancing of the branches of government from that perspective, because it, like you said, takes Congress's perspective into consideration as well.
So, why does all this matter? Because these hearings and judicial philosophies influence how laws are interpreted and enforced, impacting everything from election integrity to environmental protections to individual rights. Senator Kennedy's questions help shine a light on how carefully our judges must balance the law, precedent, and constitutional principles. Thanks for watching and taking the time to unpack this with me.